The rotors of the UH-60 Black Hawk thundered overhead as Lieutenant Sarah Collins stepped onto the tarmac of Fork Ridge, a sprawling U.S. Army base carved into the desert plains of Nevada. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the smell of diesel, sweat, and dust. Around her, soldiers moved with mechanical rhythm, loading crates, shouting orders, checking weapons. But when they noticed her insignia, their focus shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, eyes followed. She felt it immediately, the weight of silent judgment. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she walked toward the command building. A few soldiers exchanged smirks. One leaned toward another and muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Another quota officer. Bet she won't last a month. Sarah didn't react. She had heard worse. At West Point, at her first assignment overseas, in every room where she had to prove that competence wasn't a gendered trait, her hand stayed firm on her duffel strap, her chin level. She had learned long ago that silence was its own weapon, one sharper than words. Inside the command office, Colonel Davis, a grizzled veteran with a face carved by decades of service, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Lieutenant Collins." "You're early," he said, his tone neutral, his eyes still on the file. "Yes, sir," she replied crisply. He flipped through her record, humming under his breath. West Point honors, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Syria. Commendations for leadership and marksmanship. He paused, finally glancing up. "And yet, you requested reassignment to Fork Ridge. Why?" Sarah hesitated a fraction of a second before replying. "Because this base trains the best, sir. I wanted to be part of that." Davis leaned back, his gaze sharp. "Fork Ridge doesn't make exceptions, Lieutenant. You'll have to earn your place." "I wouldn't have it any other way, sir." He gave a curt nod and dismissed her with a wave. Outside, the Nevada sun hit her full force again. Sweat trickled down her neck as she made her way toward the barracks. The base was a maze of sand-colored buildings, armored trucks, and echoing loudspeakers barking orders. The closer she got to the soldiers, the more the whispers grew. Who's she replacing? The new ops officer. Didn't that position go to Captain Monroe last month? Apparently not. Guess politics wins again. When Sarah entered the common room, the conversation died instantly. A group of soldiers, mostly men in their late 20s, sat around a table, cards scattered across it. One of them, tall with a confident smirk, looked up and gave a lazy salute. "Ma'am," he said. "Didn't think HQ still sent fresh faces out here. Must have been desperate." She met his eyes calmly. "Name and rank, soldier?" "Staff Sergeant Brooks," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "I run the recon unit you'll probably be commanding on paper." "On paper?" she repeated, setting her duffel down. "Yeah," he said with a smirk. "Out here, rank only matters if the team believes you can lead them." A few soldiers chuckled under their breath. Sarah didn't flinch. She just looked around the room and said evenly, "Then I'll give you something to believe in." Without another word, she walked out. That night, she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling fan creaking above her. Every insult replayed in her head like echoes in a canyon. But so did the faces of those she had once saved, the convoy ambushed outside Fallujah, the medic she dragged through crossfire, the boy in Mosul whose life she protected until backup arrived. They had doubted her then too, and she had proven them wrong every time. At dawn, the base horn blared. The desert sky turned from black to crimson. Sarah was already awake, her uniform crisp, boots polished, rifle cleaned. She jogged to the training field where soldiers were running drills under Sergeant Brooks' supervision. "Morning, Lieutenant," he said without enthusiasm. "We're testing endurance today." "Want to watch?" "No," she replied. "I'll join." The men exchanged looks, some amused, others skeptical. Brooks shrugged. "Suit yourself." The run began, 6 miles through blistering desert heat. Sand stung their faces, boots sank into soft ground, and sweat poured down every neck. One by one, soldiers slowed, cursing under their breath. Sarah didn't break stride. When others stopped for water, she pushed harder, her breath steady, her pace relentless. By mile 5, the smirks were gone. Brooks, panting beside her, finally muttered, "You don't have to prove anything." She didn't answer. When they reached the finish line, she didn't collapse or gasp for air. She simply turned to the men behind her and said, "Leadership isn't about orders. It's about example. You follow those who don't quit." For the first time, there was no laughter, only silence. Later, in the mess hall, conversations grew hushed again as she entered, but this time the tone had shifted. Brooks sat at a corner table, arms crossed, watching her. When she passed by, he said quietly, "Not bad for your first day." She gave a slight nod. "It's not my first day, Sergeant. Just the first time you noticed." Days turned into weeks. Sarah's schedule was brutal. She trained with the infantry at dawn, studied intelligence data by noon, and coordinated logistics after dark. Every small task she handled with precision. No shortcuts, no complaints. She learned every soldier's name, every strength and flaw, every weapon sound in the range. Slowly, the tension began to crack. A few soldiers started following her commands without hesitation. A few more stopped snickering during her briefings. But the wall of doubt hadn't fallen completely. Then came the night that would change everything. It was nearly midnight when the alarm blared through the base. The red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and loudspeakers barked. All units to command center. Code Black. Sarah sprinted to the operations room. Colonel Davis stood at the head of a table, surrounded by senior officers. A live feed displayed grainy footage of a desert compound burning in the distance. "A recon team went dark 2 hours ago," Davis said grimly. "Intel confirms they've been captured by insurgents across the border." A murmur spread through the room. "Extraction window?" Sarah asked. "Unknown. Terrain's unstable. Comms are jammed," said Major Klein. "We can't risk another loss." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Then we don't wait. We adapt." All eyes turned to her. "What are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" Davis asked. "A small strike team," she replied. "Fast, silent, precise. Get in before they know we're coming." Brooks frowned. "That's suicide." "No," Sarah said firmly. "It's strategy." The room went silent. The colonel studied her for a long moment. "You're volunteering to lead?" "Yes, sir." A heavy pause followed, filled only by the hum of the monitors. Finally, Davis said, "Approved. You have 6 hours to plan your op." As the others filed out, Brooks lingered near the doorway. "You really think they'll follow you out there?" She looked him in the eye. "They don't have to believe in me, Sergeant. They just have to believe we can make it home." He stared at her for a long second before giving a reluctant nod. "Guess we'll find out." That night, as Sarah reviewed maps and satellite images under dim lights, the base outside grew quiet. The wind howled against the walls, rattling the windows. Every so often, she'd catch a glimpse of her reflection, tired, determined, unbreakable. Tomorrow, she would lead a mission no one believed could succeed. Tomorrow, the woman they ignored would command their respect, not with rank, not with words, but with action. And when the sun rose over the Nevada desert, it carried with it the beginning of a story the base would never forget. The desert wind howled through the open hangar doors as dawn crept over Fork Ridge. Pale sunlight glinted off the metallic edges of armored Humvees, casting long shadows across the floor. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood at a briefing table surrounded by maps, satellite images, and tactical printouts. Her eyes scanned the details with mechanical precision, every contour line, every coordinate. She didn't blink. Not once. 6 hours. That's all she had been given. 6 hours to assemble a team, form a plan, and prepare to step into enemy territory with soldiers who barely respected her name. The silence in the room was sharp, broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights. She heard the soft footsteps before she saw him. Staff Sergeant Brooks, the same man who had mocked her arrival just weeks ago. He carried his helmet under one arm, his expression unreadable. "Colonel said you're leading the strike team," he said, stopping at the edge of the table. "That's right," she replied without looking up. He gave a low whistle. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. Most officers would have let someone else take this suicide run." "Good thing I'm not most officers," she said, finally lifting her gaze. Brooks studied her for a moment, and set his helmet down. "You've got 5 men willing to go. The rest, not so sure." Sarah nodded. She expected as much. Trust wasn't built overnight. It was forged in the fire of danger. "Then 5 is enough," she said simply. Brooks blinked. "You're serious?" She looked up from the map, her eyes steady. "I'd rather have 5 who want to fight than 20 who'll hesitate when it matters." There was something in her voice, not arrogance, but conviction, that made him stop arguing. Without another word, he turned and left to gather the volunteers. 2 hours later, the mission briefing room filled with the faint buzz of static as Sarah stood before the team. Sergeant Brooks, Corporal Vance, Private Reed, Specialist Marino, and Sergeant Hawley. All handpicked, all skeptical. They sat around the table, arms crossed, faces grim. Sarah clicked the projector. The map of the Sierra border zone illuminated the wall. "Our recon unit went dark near this village," she began. "Intel suggests they were ambushed and taken into the nearby canyon compound. The terrain is unstable, narrow ridges, sand cliffs, and zero drone access due to jamming interference." Reed frowned. "And we're going in blind?" "Not blind," Sarah corrected. "Prepared." She tapped the map again. "We'll approach from the north ridge. It's high ground, minimal patrols. We move silent until contact. Extraction will be from the South Canyon via Black Hawk 01. Moreno raised an eyebrow. "What if comms go down?" "They will," Sarah replied. "When that happens, we switch to visual signals. 2-finger point means eyes up. Palm open means freeze. Red flare means retreat immediately. Any questions?" The room stayed silent. Every man was waiting for her to show weakness, to waver, to hesitate. She didn't. Her voice carried the weight of certainty. Brooks finally broke the silence. "You ever led a team this small before?" Her eyes locked with his. "Yes," she said quietly. "And every one of them made it home." That was the first moment they saw her not as an officer, but as a leader. By midday, the heat was brutal. The desert shimmered in waves, swallowing sound. The strike team loaded their weapons in the hangar's shadow. Magazines clicked into rifles, straps tightened, radios tested. Sarah double-checked each man's gear personally. Water ration, medical kit, ammo count? She asked each of them in turn. "Yes, ma'am," they replied, more out of habit than respect. When she reached Brooks, he grinned faintly. "You really think this plan's gonna work?" She adjusted her rifle strap. "Plans don't win missions. Discipline does." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You sound like Davis." "Maybe," she said, glancing toward the horizon. "But Davis isn't coming with us." The helicopter blades screamed to life, dust and grit swirling through the air. The team ducked their heads and boarded, a sound so deafening it swallowed their thoughts. Inside, Sarah strapped in, the headset pressing tight against her ears. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. Fort Ridge Command to Strike 1. You are cleared for departure. Roger that, she replied. Wheels up. The Black Hawk lifted, shaking violently before stabilizing. Through the open side door, the desert stretched endless and golden beneath them, a sea of silence waiting to swallow them whole. No one spoke during the flight. Each man was trapped in his own thoughts, fear, doubt, adrenaline. Sarah stared at the map glowing on her wrist tablet, the green dots marking their target zone. Every detail she memorized like scripture. After 40 minutes, the pilot's voice broke through. Strike 1, 1 minute to drop. Sarah tightened her gloves, checked her rifle, and looked at her team. Masks on. No chatter unless necessary. Once we're down, stay low and follow signals. The helicopter dipped sharply. Wind blasted through the cabin. Then, go. They jumped into the storm. The first thing she felt was the sting of sand. The second, silence. Total, unnatural silence. The Black Hawk disappeared over the ridge, leaving nothing but the howl of the wind. Sarah crouched behind a rock formation, scanning the horizon through her scope. The canyon loomed ahead, a scar in the earth, deep and narrow. Faint smoke rose from somewhere inside. She signaled the team forward. They moved like shadows, each step measured, rifles raised. The desert floor crunched softly beneath their boots. Every instinct in Sarah's body was alive. She could feel the air shift with every gust, hear the faintest rattle of a loose pebble. The years of combat, the hours of training, all of it clicked into place like gears in a machine. Halfway to the canyon edge, Marino froze. He raised a hand, motion ahead. Sarah dropped to one knee and peered through her scope. 2 enemy scouts stood by a truck, rifles slung, unaware. Without speaking, she made a signal. 2 fingers, cross-cut motion. Brooks nodded. He crept forward, knife glinting in the pale light. In seconds, it was done. Clean, silent, efficient. The bodies were dragged out of sight. Sarah moved forward again, her heartbeat steady. We keep going, she whispered. They reached the canyon edge just as the sun dipped low, painting everything in blood-orange hues. Below, the enemy camp stretched across the ravine, tents, vehicles, and guards pacing the perimeter. And in the center, the recon team, tied, beaten, barely alive. Reed exhaled sharply. How the hell are we getting them out of that? Sarah crouched lower. By being smarter than they are. She studied the camp layout, tracing lines in the dirt with her gloved finger. 2 snipers on the east ridge, 1 machine gun nest near the center. They expect a frontal assault, so we don't give them one. Her eyes narrowed. We'll strike from the cliffs above, neutralize Overwatch first. Then we move in under cover of darkness. Brooks frowned. That's a tight window. Which is why we don't miss, she replied. He smirked despite himself. You're starting to sound like a real commander. Sarah didn't smile. I've always been one. You're just starting to notice. As the last light of day faded, the desert grew cold. Shadows stretched long, and the hum of enemy generators echoed faintly. Sarah and her team prepared their rifles, checked silencers, and synchronized watches. At exactly 2,100 hours, she gave the order. Go. The first shot cracked softly, a whisper of death. The sniper on the east ridge dropped silently. Another followed. Within seconds, the camp perimeter was blind. Sarah led the descent in the canyon, rope biting into her gloves. The ground met them with a soft thud. They moved like ghosts through the camp, taking down guards one by one. By the time the hostages came into view, only a handful of enemies remained. And that's when everything changed. From the darkness beyond the tents, floodlights burst to life, blinding, searing. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the sand around them. They had been spotted. Ambush! Brooks yelled. Sarah's instincts took over. Take cover. Defensive formation now. The canyon exploded with noise. Shouts, gunfire, chaos. Dust filled the air like smoke. But through it all, Sarah's voice cut clear and calm through the comms. Hold the line. Do not break formation. Even in the madness, they followed her voice. Her commands. Her courage. And for the first time, not one man doubted her. Gunfire ripped through the canyon like thunder rolling through a storm. Muzzle flashes lit the rock walls in short, violent bursts of orange. Sand sprayed with every impact. The air stank of cordite and smoke. Lieutenant Sarah Collins slammed her back against a jagged boulder, scanning through the haze. Her voice came through the radio, low but steady. Brooks, suppressing fire West Ridge. Moreno, 2 o'clock, moving targets. Reed, stay with the hostages now. The men obeyed instinctively. No hesitation. No second guessing. Bullets cracked above their heads, ricocheting off stone, but her tone cut through the chaos like a knife. Calm, measured, unshakable. Brooks crawled beside her, reloading his rifle. They had spotters in the ridge. How the hell did they know we were coming? Someone tripped a motion beacon, Sarah replied, firing a burst to keep the enemies pinned. Doesn't matter. We adapt. She leaned out, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. One shot. A man fell. Another round. Another target down. Brooks stole a glance at her face, streaked with dust, eyes cold and precise. Not the nervous officer he had expected. Not even close. Okay, Lieutenant, he muttered under his breath. Maybe you do belong here. The firefight stretched for what felt like hours. They were outnumbered 2-1, but Sarah's coordination turned chaos into rhythm. Shift left. She barked. Cover the civilians. Moreno, smoke now. A grenade clinked somewhere behind them. Sarah spun, grabbed Brooks by the collar, and yanked him down just as the blast tore a crater where he had been crouching. Rocks rained down, a sound deafening. When the dust cleared, Brooks stared at her in disbelief. You just saved my damn life. Try not to need it twice, she said, already moving. That was the moment he stopped calling her ma'am with sarcasm. Minutes blurred. The team pressed forward inch by inch until the last pocket of resistance broke. Sarah scanned the perimeter, breath heavy but controlled. All clear, she said, and turned toward the captives huddled behind an overturned vehicle. There were 5 of them, 3 recon soldiers, 1 communications tech, and a civilian informant. Status? She asked. The tech, bleeding from a cut on his temple, looked up weakly. Alive, barely. Sarah knelt beside him, checking his pulse. You're safe now. We're getting you out. Reed, the youngest of her squad, whispered, Ma'am, extraction zones compromised. Enemy vehicles moving in from the South Pass. 8 to 5 minutes. Brooks cursed. We're boxed in. Sarah thought fast. Her mind ran calculations terrain, line of sight, ammunition left. Then her eyes flicked to the steep canyon wall. Jagged, climbable, narrow. We're not boxed in, she said. We're going up. The men followed her stare and went pale. Up there? Vance asked. That's a suicide climb. We've got injured. Sarah turned to him, voice low but certain. Can we make it possible? She ripped open her pack, pulling out climbing hooks, nylon rope, and carabiners. Brooks, you take point. Reed, you assist the wounded. Moreno, cover rear until last man is off the ground. No one argued this time. They moved, fast. Gunfire echoed from below as the enemy regrouped. Tracers zipped past their heads, illuminating the rock face. Sarah fired bursts in reply, buying them seconds, precious fleeting seconds. Her shoulder burned from recoil, her throat raw from shouting commands, but she never slowed. When the last hostage was halfway up the wall, a bullet struck the rock inches from her head, showering her with debris. Brooks shouted from above, "You're the last one, move." I said, "Cover fire." "Go," she yelled back. He swore under his breath, leaned over, and extended his arm. "Lieutenant, that's an order." She looked up, smirked faintly despite the danger, and leapt. Their hands locked, boots scraping against stone. Brooks pulled her up just as another volley cracked the air below. They rolled over the ridge edge, both gasping. For a moment, no one spoke. The desert stretched silent beneath them, the canyon glowing with distant fire. Sarah rose, dusted herself off, and scanned the horizon. 2 miles north, she said, pointing. There's a dry riverbed natural cover. That's our path to extraction. Brooks nodded, still catching his breath. You're something else, Collins. She didn't respond, just started walking. They moved through the darkness, the rescued team limping between them. The night was bitterly cold now, wind cutting through their gear. Every step was cautious, every sound amplified by the emptiness around them. Reed broke the silence first. "Lieutenant, back there, when everything went to hell, how do you stay so calm?" Sarah didn't slow. "Because panic gets people killed." "Yeah, but weren't you scared?" She glanced at him, the faintest smile on her lips. "Of course I was. Fear keeps you alert. It reminds you what's at stake. The trick is not letting it take the wheel." Reed nodded, thoughtful. Even Brooks, trudging a few paces behind, looked at her differently now. Not as an outsider, as a leader. By the time they reached the riverbed, the sky had turned pitch black. The wind carried faint static from their radio's partial connection. Brooks fiddled with his headset until a broken voice crackled through. "Strike one? This is Fort Ridge copy?" Sarah grabbed the transmitter. "Command, this is Strike 1. Package secured. Requesting immediate extraction at Grid 7 Delta." There was a pause, then Colonel Davis's gruff voice. "Copy, Lieutenant. Black Hawk 01 en route. 15 minutes. She exhaled softly. "Roger that." Brooks slumped onto a rock. 15 minutes is a long time out here. "Then let's make it feel short," she said. They formed a perimeter, rifles ready, scanning the dunes for movement. The minutes crawled. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every gust of wind carried whispers of pursuit. Then they heard it a low rumble, distant at first, then louder. Not helicopter blades. Engines. Multiple. Reed's voice cracked. Convoy coming from the south. Sarah raised her binoculars. Headlights flickered across the dunes. 3 trucks, maybe more. "They found us," she murmured. Brooks cursed. "We can't hold this spot for 15 minutes. Sarah lowered the binoculars, thinking fast. Her gaze fell on the jagged rock formations to the west, narrow, maze-like, perfect for an ambush. "We don't need to hold it," she said. "We need to delay them." She turned to Brooks. "You and Vance take high ground with suppressive fire. Moreno, set 2 charges along that ridge, make them think we're a full unit. Reed, stay with the wounded. I'll coordinate timing." He hesitated. "That's splitting the team." "Exactly," she said. "We make noise, not war." The orders snapped them into motion. Explosives were set, rifles positioned, safety pins pulled. The first truck came into view, headlights slicing through the darkness. Sarah waited, hand hovering over the detonator. Closer, closer. "Now!" The ridge exploded in a flash of light and thunder. Sand and debris rained down as the convoy screeched to a halt, soldiers diving for cover. Brooks and Vance opened fire, short bursts that echoed like distant drumbeats. "Good hit," Brooks shouted. Sarah keyed her radio. "Command, we're under heavy fire." "Extraction ETA?" 01 approaching 3 minutes, Davis replied. "Hold position." 3 minutes. She could survive 3 minutes. Or die trying. The battlefield became chaos again. Smoke, shouting, the smell of burning oil. Sarah's world shrank to the rhythm of gunfire and breath. Each pull of the trigger, each decision, each heartbeat was a small eternity. Then the faint roar of rotor blades cut through the storm. She looked up. There it was. Black Hawk 01, descending fast. "Move, move," she ordered, signaling the team to fall back. They sprinted across the dunes, bullets chasing their heels. Brooks fired one last burst, then ran beside her, gripping her arm to steady her as they climbed into the chopper. As the Black Hawk lifted, the desert below erupted in a sea of orange and smoke. Inside the cabin, the rescued soldiers slumped in relief. Reed laughed shakily. "We made it." Sarah didn't answer right away. She just stared out the open door, watching the battlefield shrink beneath them. Only when the horizon swallowed the last trace of fire did she finally exhale. Brooks leaned closer, voice low. "Lieutenant, I was wrong about you." She turned her head, meeting his gaze. "You weren't wrong," she said quietly. "You just hadn't seen enough yet." He smiled faintly. "Well, I've seen plenty now." Back at Fork Ridge, when the Black Hawk touched down, medics rushed to meet them. Colonel Davis stood at the edge of the pad, arms crossed, expression unreadable. As Sarah stepped off, he said, "I heard your plan fell apart halfway through." "Yes, sir," she replied. "But we built a new one halfway down." Davis's lips twitched the closest he ever came to a smile. "Noted." The others disembarked behind her, quiet but changed. The same men who once doubted her now walked in her shadow, speaking her name with something like respect. The reluctant team was reluctant no more. And deep down, Sarah knew the war for trust wasn't over, but tonight she had won her first real battle. The desert wind howled across Fork Ridge as dawn broke over the horizon, staining the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood alone near the flight line, her uniform still dusty from the night before. The base was waking up, rotors spinning, trucks rumbling, but her mind hadn't rested since the extraction. She should have felt relief. She'd brought every one of her people home. But instead, she felt the uneasy chill of something unfinished. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. "Lieutenant Collins," a deep voice called. It was Colonel Davis. His expression was unreadable, as always. "Sir," she said, snapping to attention. "Walk with me," he ordered. They moved toward the command building, past saluting guards and curious glances. The whispers had already started. Everyone knew about last night's mission, the ambush, the rescue, the impossible escape. But no one could decide whether Sarah's actions were reckless or heroic. Inside the debriefing room, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. A long table of officers sat waiting: Major Harlow, Intelligence Chief Grant, and 2 field commanders. Sarah's stomach nodded. She'd expected a report, not a tribunal. Colonel Davis motioned to a chair. "Sit." She did. Grant leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Lieutenant, our intel reports you deviated from your original plan, disobeyed direct protocol. In fact, care to explain?" Sarah met his gaze calmly. "The ambush changed the situation. Command was unreachable. I made tactical adjustments to complete the mission." Harlow scoffed. "Adjustments? You detonated charges without clearance, split your squad, and initiated a high-risk extraction route. That's not an adjustment, that's improvisation. Improvisation saved 7 lives, she replied evenly. A heavy silence followed. Davis's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Finally, Grant spoke again. We'll review your after-action report. In the meantime, Lieutenant, you're to remain on base. No field operations until further notice. Sarah froze. Sir, with respect, dismissed, Grant cut her off. Outside, the sunlight felt harsher. She walked past rows of hangars, trying to control the burn of frustration in her chest. She wasn't angry about being reprimanded. She was angry because something about that ambush didn't make sense. Brooks caught up to her near the barracks. Heard they grounded you, he said. She nodded. Temporarily. He frowned. That's bull. You saved everyone. They should be giving you a medal. Medals don't matter, she said. But that ambush someone tipped them off. The timing was too precise. They knew our route, our extraction code, even our radio frequency. Brooks looked uneasy. You think we've got a leak? I think someone's feeding intel to the enemy. For the next 2 days, Sarah kept her head down on paper, anyway. Off record, she dug through mission logs, supply manifests, and encrypted transmission reports. Most were routine. But one pattern stood out, a series of unauthorized data pings sent from Fort Ridge's relay tower transmissions masked as maintenance diagnostics. She took her findings to Brooks and Vance in the mess hall that night. The room buzzed with laughter and the smell of coffee, but their table was quiet. Sarah slid the file across to them. These pings went out 30 minutes before our mission launch. Each matches the coordinates of previous ambushes. Brooks's brow furrowed. So someone inside Fort Ridge warned them. Exactly, she said. But whoever it is, they have high-level access. Vance exhaled slowly. You're going after them, aren't you? Sarah's eyes hardened. Not yet. I'm going to prove it first. The next morning, she went straight to the communications tower under the pretext of checking the data relay. The tech officer on duty, Sergeant Lang, barely looked up from his console. Lieutenant Collins? You're not assigned here, he said, puzzled. Colonel's orders, she lied smoothly. Routine systems check. Lang shrugged. All yours, ma'am. She scanned the console logs, nothing unusual. But when she opened the encrypted archive, a chill ran down her spine. Buried deep was a string of outgoing transmissions labeled Project Raven. Each message carried one tag, Grant Access. Intelligence Chief Grant, she whispered. The realization hit like a gunshot. Grant, the same officer who tried to discredit her. The same man who grounded her. He wasn't protecting the mission. He was protecting himself. Sarah's next steps had to be careful. One wrong move and she'd be shut down or worse. That evening, she met Brooks by the training range. The sky glowed orange as the sun dipped behind the hills. I found the leak, she said quietly. It's Grant. Brooks blinked. You're serious? He's been transmitting coordinates under a covert tag. The ambush wasn't a coincidence. It was a setup. He wanted us dead or captured. Brooks cursed under his breath. Why? I don't know yet, she said. But I'm going to find out. He looked at her for a long moment. You realize if you accuse him without proof, they'll bury you. I'm not accusing, she said. I'm going to catch him in the act. That night, she slipped into the command building after curfew. Her boots made no sound on the tile floors. She bypassed 2 guards by pretending to check a datapad, then entered the restricted server room. Inside, blue screens glowed like ghosts in the dark. She connected her handheld terminal, eyes darting across streams of code. There it was happening again. a live transmission bouncing from the tower to an unregistered receiver outside base limits. Sarah traced the source line encrypted, rerouted through multiple proxies, but she caught the timestamp. A new message forming. A file labeled Eagle Mission, Phase 2 Deployment. She froze. Phase 2. That meant another ambush was already in motion. She copied the data to her terminal and unplugged just as the door opened. Grant stood in the doorway, eyes cold. "You shouldn't be here, Lieutenant." Her pulse spiked. "Neither should you, sir." He stepped closer, voice low. "You're digging in the wrong places. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then explain," she shot back. "Why send coordinates to the enemy? Why risk American lives?" Grant smirked. "You think small, Collins. You think this war is about missions and medals. It's about control. About shaping what happens next. And people like you idealists don't survive long in this system." He turned to leave, but she blocked his path. "I've already sent your transmissions to Colonel Davis." It was a bluff, but he didn't know that. Grant's smirk faltered. For a heartbeat, she saw fear flash in his eyes. Then he lunged. Sarah reacted instantly, parried his strike, drove her elbow into his ribs, swept his legs. He hit the floor hard, gasping. She grabbed his wrist and pinned him down. "You're done, sir." Grant sneered, coughing. "You think one woman can take down an entire system?" "No," she said, tightening her grip. "But one truth can." Security arrived minutes later. Davis himself came, drawn by the commotion. Sarah handed over the data drive silently. Grant tried to protest, shouting about fabricated evidence and insubordination, but the code on the terminal spoke for itself. Davis ordered him taken into custody without another word. As the MPs dragged Grant away, his eyes locked on Sarah's. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You just made powerful enemies." She said nothing. She didn't need to. Later, in Davis's office, the colonel stared at her across his desk. "You realize the risk you took?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "But if I hadn't, there'd be another team walking into an ambush tomorrow." He leaned back, exhaling. "I should reprimand you again for breaking security protocols." She met his eyes. "But you won't." A slow smile touched his lips. "No, I won't." He stood and extended his hand. "Good work, Lieutenant." For the first time since joining Fort Ridge, Sarah felt genuine respect in his tone. Not tolerance. Not skepticism. Respect. The next morning, word spread across the base. How she'd exposed a traitor in command. How her instincts had saved countless lives. Soldiers she barely knew nodded as she passed. Some even saluted first. Brooks met her outside the hangar, grinning. "Guess they're not ignoring you anymore." Sarah smiled faintly. "Respect isn't given. It's earned." He nodded. "So what now?" She looked toward the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. "Now," she said, "we finish what we started." Because she knew the enemy out there wasn't finished. And neither was she. The desert wind howled across Fork Ridge as dawn broke over the horizon, staining the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood alone near the flight line, her uniform still dusty from the night before. The base was waking up, rotors spinning, trucks rumbling, but her mind hadn't rested since the extraction. She should have felt relief. She'd brought every one of her people home. But instead, she felt the uneasy chill of something unfinished. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. "Lieutenant Collins," a deep voice called. It was Colonel Davis. His expression was unreadable, as always. "Sir," she said, snapping to attention. "Walk with me," he ordered. They moved toward the command building, past saluting guards and curious glances. The whispers had already started. Everyone knew about last night's mission, the ambush, the rescue, the impossible escape. But no one could decide whether Sarah's actions were reckless or heroic. Inside the debriefing room, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. A long table of officers sat waiting Major Harlow, Intelligence Chief Grant, and 2 field commanders. Sarah's stomach knotted. She'd expected a report, not a tribunal. Colonel Davis motioned to a chair. "Sit." She did. Grant leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Lieutenant, our intel reports you deviated from your original plan, disobeyed direct protocol, in fact. Care to explain?" Sarah met his gaze calmly. The ambush changed the situation. Command was unreachable. I made tactical adjustments to complete the mission. Harlow scoffed. "Adjustments? You detonated charges without clearance, split your squad, and initiated a high-risk extraction route. That's not an adjustment, that's improvisation." "Improvisation saved 7 lives," she replied evenly. A heavy silence followed. Davis's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Finally, Grant spoke again. "We'll review your after-action report. In the meantime, Lieutenant, you're to remain on base. No field operations until further notice." Sarah froze. "Sir, with respect?" "Dismissed." Grant cut her off. Outside, the sunlight felt harsher. She walked past rows of hangars, trying to control the burn of frustration in her chest. She wasn't angry about being reprimanded. She was angry because something about that ambush didn't make sense. Brooks caught up to her near the barracks. "Heard they grounded you," he said. She nodded. "Temporarily." He frowned. "That's bull. You saved everyone. They should be giving you a medal." "Medals don't matter," she said. "But that ambush, someone tipped them off. The timing was too precise. They knew our route, our extraction code, even our radio frequency." Brooks looked uneasy. "You think we've got a leak?" "I think someone's feeding intel to the enemy." For the next 2 days, Sarah kept her head down on paper, anyway. Off record, she dug through mission logs, supply manifests, and encrypted transmission reports. Most were routine. But one pattern stood out, a series of unauthorized data pings sent from Fort Ridge's relay tower transmissions masked as maintenance diagnostics. She took her findings to Brooks and Vance in the mess hall that night. The room buzzed with laughter and the smell of coffee, but their table was quiet. Sarah slid the file across to them. "These pings went out 30 minutes before our mission launch. Each matches the coordinates of previous ambushes." Brooks's brow furrowed. "So someone inside Fort Ridge warned them." "Exactly," she said. "But whoever it is, they have high-level access." Vance exhaled slowly. "You're going after them, aren't you?" Sarah's eyes hardened. "Not yet. I'm going to prove it first." The next morning, she went straight to the communications tower under the pretext of checking the data relay. The tech officer on duty, Sergeant Lang, barely looked up from his console. "Lieutenant Collins?" "You're not assigned here," he said, puzzled. "Colonel's orders," she lied smoothly. "Routine systems check." Lang shrugged. "All yours, ma'am." She scanned the console logs, nothing unusual. But when she opened the encrypted archive, a chill ran down her spine. Buried deep was a string of outgoing transmissions labeled Project Raven. Each message carried one tag: Grant Access. "Intelligence Chief Grant," she whispered. The realization hit like a gunshot. Grant, the same officer who tried to discredit her. The same man who grounded her. He wasn't protecting the mission. He was protecting himself. Sarah's next steps had to be careful. One wrong move and she'd be shut down or worse. That evening, she met Brooks by the training range. The sky glowed orange as the sun dipped behind the hills. "I found the leak," she said quietly. It's Grant. Brooks blinked. You're serious? He's been transmitting coordinates under a covert tag. The ambush wasn't a coincidence. It was a setup. He wanted us dead or captured. Brooks cursed under his breath. Why? I don't know yet, she said. But I'm going to find out. He looked at her for a long moment. You realize if you accuse him without proof, they'll bury you. I'm not accusing, she said. I'm going to catch him in the act. That night, she slipped into the command building after curfew. Her boots made no sound on the tile floors. She bypassed 2 guards by pretending to check a data pad, then entered the restricted server room. Inside, blue screens glowed like ghosts in the dark. She connected her handheld terminal, eyes darting across streams of code. There it was happening again. A live transmission bouncing from the tower to an unregistered receiver outside base limits. Sarah traced the source line encrypted, rerouted through multiple proxies, but she caught the timestamp. A new message forming. A file labeled, Eagle Mission, Phase 2 Deployment. She froze. Phase 2. That meant another ambush was already in motion. She copied the data to her terminal and unplugged just as the door opened. Grant stood in the doorway, eyes cold. You shouldn't be here, Lieutenant. Her pulse spiked. Neither should you, sir. He stepped closer, voice low. You're digging in the wrong places. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then explain, she shot back. Why send coordinates to the enemy? Why risk American lives? Grant smirked. You think small, Collins. You think this war is about missions and medals. It's about control. About shaping what happens next. And people like you idealists don't survive long in this system. He turned to leave, but she blocked his path. I've already sent your transmissions to Colonel Davis. It was a bluff, but he didn't know that. Grant's smirk faltered. For a heartbeat, she saw fear flash in his eyes. Then he lunged. Sarah reacted instantly, parried his strike, drove her elbow into his ribs, swept his legs. He hit the floor hard, gasping. She grabbed his wrist and pinned him down. You're done, sir. Grant sneered, coughing. You think one woman can take down an entire system? No, she said, tightening her grip. But one truth can. Security arrived minutes later. Davis himself came, drawn by the commotion. Sarah handed over the data drive silently. Grant tried to protest, shouting about fabricated evidence and insubordination, but the code on the terminal spoke for itself. Davis ordered him taken into custody without another word. As the MPs dragged Grant away, his eyes locked on Sarah's. You'll regret this, he hissed. You just made powerful enemies. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Later, in Davis's office, the colonel stared at her across his desk. You realize the risk you took? Yes, sir, she replied. But if I hadn't, there'd be another team walking into an ambush tomorrow. He leaned back, exhaling. I should reprimand you again for breaking security protocols. She met his eyes. But you won't. A slow smile touched his lips. No, I won't. He stood and extended his hand. Good work, Lieutenant. For the first time since joining Fort Ridge, Sarah felt genuine respect in his tone. Not tolerance. Not skepticism. Respect. The next morning, word spread across the base. How she'd exposed a traitor in command. How her instincts had saved countless lives. Soldiers she barely knew nodded as she passed. Some even saluted first. Brooks met her outside the hangar, grinning. Guess they're not ignoring you anymore. Sarah smiled faintly. Respect isn't given. It's earned. He nodded. So what now? She looked toward the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. Now, she said, we finish what we started. Because she knew the enemy out there wasn't finished. and neither was she. The morning sun had barely risen over Fork Ridge, casting pale light across the desert. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood on the helipad, her boots crunching against the gravel. She was ready, body, mind, and spirit, for the mission she had been waiting for. The base was alive with activity. Black Hawks hummed, engines warming. Soldiers moved in precise formation, every step a testament to military discipline. But this time, Sarah wasn't a subordinate waiting for orders. She was the order. Colonel Davis approached, clipboard in hand. "Strike team, you're cleared for Phase 2 interception," he said. "Intel confirms the enemy convoy is moving to a staging point 50 miles east. Full engagement expected. 01 will insert you. Extraction within 45 minutes." Sarah nodded, scanning her team. Brooks, Moreno, Reed, Vance, Hawley. All battle-hardened, all tense, all trusting her implicitly. This trust had taken weeks to earn, but it was absolute now. She turned to them. "This isn't a drill. There's no room for error. We move fast, we move smart, and we cover each other. Everyone in. Everyone out." No one questioned her. No one hesitated. Inside the Black Hawk, the roar of the rotor shook them like thunder. Sarah double-checked her rifle, her gear, her comms. Outside the open hatch, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Brooks leaned in beside her. "You ever think about what happens if we don't make it?" She didn't flinch. "Fear keeps you sharp, but hesitation gets you killed. Focus on the mission, not the end." He nodded, impressed despite himself. "You really are something else." Sarah only glanced at him, her eyes already scanning the horizon. 15 minutes from the drop zone, the Black Hawk descended into the canyon's shadow. The convoy came into view. 5 trucks, mounted guns, dozens of armed insurgents. They were moving with precision, likely following insider instructions, perhaps even the same network Grant had used. Sarah activated her headset. "Team, positions. Take high ground. Vance, cover the east ridge. Brooks, flanking fire west. Moreno, suppressive fire center. Reed and Hawley, ready the explosives. I'll coordinate." The team moved like a single organism, every motion rehearsed, every command precise. Bullets began to whine around them, kicked up by enemy suppressive fire. Sarah didn't flinch. She climbed the ridge, rifle ready, spotting targets. One insurgent leaned out to aim at Brooks below. Her shot echoed through the canyon, precise, deadly. The man collapsed silently. The team surged forward, covering each other, moving closer to the convoy. They reached the convoy's center point. The first truck was rigged with explosives, likely meant to ambush any pursuing forces. Sarah signaled Moreno. In seconds, charges were disarmed. "Good work," she said calmly. But there was no time to celebrate. The enemy had regrouped, mounting 2 trucks to flank from the south. Brooks looked at her. "They're trying to box us in again." "Exactly," she replied. "Which means we hit them first." She signaled Reed. "Trip the first charge when the second truck reaches the canyon bend." Timing is everything. Seconds felt like minutes. The enemy advanced. Sarah counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Reed triggered the explosives. The canyon erupted. Fire and smoke filled the narrow passage. Trucks overturned, engines burst into flames. Chaos. Amid the smoke, bullets tore past, ricocheting off rocks. One round struck Hale's shoulder. He grunted, dropping to the ground. "Cover him," Sarah shouted. Brooks and Moreno laid down suppressive fire, while she dragged Hawley behind a rock outcropping. Blood seeped through his uniform. Hawley groaned. I can't keep moving." "Yes, you can," Sarah said firmly, pressing a medical kit to his wound. "We don't leave anyone behind?" Brooks muttered. "You've got more guts than all of us combined." Sarah ignored him, scanning for the next threat. Another insurgent peeked from behind a burnt-out truck. One shot, neutralized. In that moment, the team felt it. The fear had vanished. Doubt evaporated. They moved because she moved. They fought because she fought. The convoy's last truck was armored, attempting to escape through a rocky pass. Sarah calculated. Too narrow for multiple vehicles. One misstep, and they could trap the team again. She turned to Brooks. "Suppressive fire on the west ridge. I'll take the high shot." Brooks glanced at her, disbelief in his eyes. "You're going to take that shot yourself?" Sarah's fingers tightened around the rifle. "I've got the angle. Cover me, and don't let them flank." The team obeyed without hesitation. Time slowed. Heartbeats matched the rhythm of the canyon's echo. Sarah aimed, breathing measured, calculating wind, distance, elevation. One shot clean. Engine sputtered, tires shredded. The armored truck skidded and came to a halt. Insurgents scrambled, but it was too late. Brooks shouted over comms, "You did it! That's the last vehicle." Sarah exhaled, but she didn't relax. The mission wasn't over. The team had to reach extraction, alive. With the convoy neutralized, they moved swiftly toward the extraction zone. The desert stretched endlessly. Every shadow was a threat, every whisper of wind a potential ambush. Sarah led the way, signaling, checking the perimeter, making split-second tactical decisions. Reed stumbled on loose sand. Sarah caught him. "You okay?" He nodded, adrenaline pumping. "Yeah. Thanks to you." Vance pointed ahead. Black Hawk in sight. 2 minutes. But just as relief started to creep in, a sudden explosion erupted behind them. Rocks and dust cascaded down a cliff face. A trap. Sarah dropped low, pulling the team behind cover. Ambush from above. Split formation. Move diagonally left. Moreno, suppressive fire. The team moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Every command from Sarah executed flawlessly. Another explosion shook the ground. Sparks flew. Reed screamed as a boulder landed near his boots. Sarah didn't flinch. She fired, precision shots taking out the insurgents on the ridge. "Move, now!" The final stretch was a sprint. Sand burned their lungs. Hale's wound slowed him, but Sarah adjusted, giving him support. The Black Hawk hovered above, rotors kicking up blinding clouds of dust. Sarah climbed the ramp first, then Brooks, then the rest. She hauled Hale up last. As the doors closed, the enemy below attempted a final push, but the aircraft lifted, gunship fire suppressing the threat. Inside, the cabin was tense but alive. Sweat, blood, and adrenaline coated every face. Brooks finally broke the silence. "You just led us through hell." Sarah gave him a faint smile, exhaustion lining her face. "We all got out alive. That's leadership." Reed looked at her in awe. I thought we were done back there." "You never hesitated." "I had to keep moving," she said simply. "If I hesitated, even for a second, someone wouldn't have made it." The Black Hawk roared toward Fork Ridge. Below, the desert stretched, silent and unyielding. The team had survived. Not just the ambush, but their own doubts. When they landed, the base erupted into chaos. Medics rushed to check the wounded. Soldiers crowded around to hear what had happened. Colonel Davis met Sarah at the ramp. His expression was unreadable, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. "You did it," he said simply. "All of you made it back." Sarah looked at her team. Brooks, Moreno, Reed, Vance, Hale, Each exhausted, each alive, each changed forever. She took a deep breath. "The mission isn't over," she said quietly. "But today, we won a battle." Brooks grinned. "You led us into hell, Lieutenant, and brought us back. They won't ignore you again." Sarah allowed herself a small, tired smile. "They won't forget, but neither will I." The sun rose over Fork Ridge, painting the desert in harsh gold and shadow. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood on the helipad, her hands resting on her rifle, eyes fixed on the horizon. The recent mission had earned her respect, yes, but it had also raised more questions. The enemy wasn't defeated, far from it. Colonel Davis approached, his footsteps crunching on gravel. "Phase 2 was a success," he said, nodding. "But our intelligence confirms the enemy has regrouped. They're moving personnel and weapons toward a hidden supply depot, likely planning a new offensive." "You're going back in." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Understood, sir." "Team ready?" "Already assembled," Davis replied. "You have full authority. I want them back alive." She scanned her team. Brooks, Marino, Reed, Vance, Hawley, all veterans now, molded by the desert, bonded by fire. Each man's respect for her had evolved into trust, and she knew the weight of that responsibility. That evening, they boarded Black Hawk 01 for insertion. The desert was calm now, the threat invisible but palpable. Each soldier in the cabin was silent, mentally reviewing strategy and contingencies. Brooks leaned toward Sarah. "You ever feel like they're one step ahead, no matter what we do?" "Then we have to think 3 steps ahead," she replied. Her voice was steady, unwavering. "Anticipate, adapt, execute." The helicopter rose into the sky, carrying them toward the unknown. Every minute in flight, Sarah reviewed the intelligence. Enemy convoy patterns, satellite imagery, terrain analysis. The supply depot wasn't far, but the path was treacherous. Narrow canyons, steep cliffs, and ambush points hidden like traps in the sand. As they approached the drop zone, Sarah keyed her comms. Team positions. Vance and Brooks, high ground on ridges. Moreno, cover the central approach. Reed and Hall, flank right and left. We move fast, we move coordinated, no mistakes. Her team executed flawlessly, each motion precise, disciplined, almost instinctive. They had learned her rhythm, her logic, her timing, and that synergy made them deadly. The desert floor came into view. Dust swirled as the Black Hawk descended, blades whipping the sand into a storm. Sarah checked her rifle, breathing steady. "Go," she ordered. They dropped. The first obstacle was immediate, a ridge blocking their path, patrolled by armed insurgents. Sarah scanned through her scope, calculating trajectory, wind speed, and distance. "Take them silently," she ordered. Brooks and Moreno moved like shadows, neutralizing the enemy without a sound. But then, a sudden flare exploded behind them, signaling reinforcements. The enemy had prepared for them. "Trap!" Reed shouted. Sarah didn't flinch. "Form defensive perimeter. Hold until I give the order to move." Gunfire erupted. Bullets ricocheted off rocks. Dust and smoke filled the canyon, stinging eyes, choking lungs. Yet Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Calm, direct, clear. "Brooks, suppressive fire on the left ridge. Vance, cover the right. Moreno, delay their advance." Her team followed, executing with deadly precision. Hale's shoulder injury slowed him, but Sarah moved beside him, offering guidance, keeping him alive. Minutes stretched like hours. The enemy was relentless, attacking from every angle. Sarah realized they weren't just defending the depot. They were trying to lure the team into a kill zone. She made a split-second decision. Reposition. Use the canyon's natural cover. Draw them forward, then trap them. The team obeyed, moving as a single unit. Sarah coordinated each step, her mind racing, anticipating enemy movements. She had to protect her team while also setting the conditions for victory. As they reached a narrow pass, Sarah gave the signal. Reed triggered charges she had set earlier. Boulders fell, blocking the enemy's escape. Trapped, the insurgents fired wildly, but the team held the high ground. Sarah picked off targets with surgical precision, directing Brooks and Marino to suppress and flank simultaneously. The battle was chaos incarnate, but in that chaos, Sarah's leadership shone. Every command precise, every action calculated, every life protected. Finally, they reached the depot itself. Crates of weapons, ammunition, and communications equipment were stacked neatly, the hub of the enemy's operations in the region. Sarah signaled the team to secure the area. We destroy the supplies, take any intel, and get out. No heroics beyond necessity. Marino began rigging explosives on the crates, while Brooks and Vance scanned for remaining insurgents. Reed documented files and communications. Halle, despite his injury, helped coordinate the perimeter. As they worked, a voice crackled over Sarah's radio. "Lieutenant Collins, this is Colonel Davis. Reinforcements are on the way." "Status?" "Depot secured." "Preparing demolition," Sarah replied. "No casualties beyond minor injuries." "Good. Extraction inbound in 10 minutes." "Keep tight." But the enemy wasn't finished. From the ridge above, a squad appeared. Elite fighters, heavily armed, trained in ambush tactics. They had followed the team unnoticed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sarah's eyes narrowed. They've adapted. Time to adapt faster. She directed the team to fall back into defensive positions, covering each other's angles. Her team responded immediately, instinctively, trusting her without question. Brooks fired a controlled volley. Marino threw a smoke grenade to obscure vision. Reed and Hall provided supporting fire. Sarah moved between positions, directing, correcting, protecting. One insurgent broke cover, aiming directly at Reed. Sarah fired first. Dead, the enemy faltered, then regrouped. Sarah saw their hesitation as opportunity. Push them back. Take the high ground. Don't let them flank us. The team surged, bullets ripping through the air, dust clouds masking movements. Slowly, methodically, they forced the enemy into retreat. Finally, the last of the insurgents fled, leaving the depot in ruins and the team alive. Sarah exhaled, adrenaline still surging, scanning for threats. None remained. Brooks approached her, his face smeared with dust and sweat. "You led us through hell again." I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," Sarah replied, wiping grime from her brow. "Just remember how to move, how to cover each other, and how to survive." Reed, still catching his breath, looked at her in awe. "I used to doubt you." "Not anymore. You saved all of us." Sarah nodded. "That's my job. Protect the team, execute the mission, and adapt. Always adapt." Holly, grimacing from his shoulder injury, muttered, "You're not just our leader anymore. You're everything a soldier should be." Sarah allowed herself a faint, tired smile. "We're all everything a soldier should be. I just make sure we survive to see it." As Black Hawk 01 descended for extraction, Sarah watched the desert stretch beneath them. The depot lay in ruins. The enemy's plan was destroyed, and the team had survived, stronger, tighter, more trusting than ever. Brooks leaned toward her. "You think this is over?" Sarah shook her head. "Not yet. There's always another mission, another challenge. But right now, we've earned this moment." The helicopter lifted off, carrying them toward Fort Ridge, and a base that would never see Sarah the same way again. The woman they had once ignored had led them through fire and survived. And in the eyes of her team, she had become legendary. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across Fork Ridge. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood at the command briefing room, staring at a large digital map of the region. Coordinates, convoy routes, and enemy positions blinked on the screen. Colonel Davis's voice broke through the tense silence. Lieutenant Collins, intelligence has confirmed the architect behind the ambushes is not just a local insurgent. He's a former contractor with access to military-grade equipment and inside information. His code name, Spectre. Sarah's pulse quickened. She had anticipated a final confrontation, but the reality of facing someone with inside knowledge of American operations sent a chill down her spine. "Where is he now?" she asked. Davis tapped the screen. "Last confirmed location, an abandoned weapons facility 80 miles east. Satellite shows heavy fortifications. Our operatives suggest he's moving key assets tonight. If we don't intercept, the consequences are catastrophic." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Then we go in. Full tactical sweep. No mistakes." "My team is ready." Davis nodded. "Understood. You have full authority. Extraction in 60 minutes once you confirm the target." By nightfall, Black Hawk 01 sliced through the dark sky like a predator. Inside, the team went over strategy one final time. Brooks checked his gear meticulously. "You've got eyes on Spectre?" Sarah shook her head. "Only intel. We'll know him when we see him. Remember, he's clever. He expects us to make mistakes." Vance leaned forward, voice low. "We're not leaving anyone behind tonight, right?" "Not one," Sarah replied, her voice calm but steely. "We move as one, we act as one, and we come back as one." Moreno, Reed, and Halle nodded, each silently absorbing the gravity of the mission. The Black Hawk descended toward the perimeter of the facility. Below, shadows shifted among crates and high walls, automated defenses glinting in the faint moonlight. As they touched down, Sarah assessed the terrain. Multiple towers, motion sensors, tripwires. The facility was a fortress. But inside, Spectre had to be moving critical assets, possibly explosives, weaponry, or intelligence that could jeopardize national security. "Team, positions," she whispered, scanning the area through night vision goggles. "Vance, cover the northwest tower. Brooks, east ridge suppression. Moreno, central entry. Reed and Halle, flank with me. Silent approach. Move on my mark." The team moved as shadows, blending with the terrain. Every step deliberate, every breath controlled. Sarah led, rifle at the ready, mind calculating angles, elevations, and potential enemy positions. Inside the facility, crates of munitions lined the walls. Guards patrolled in predictable patterns until they weren't. Sarah signaled Moreno. A guard appeared unexpectedly from the shadows. Quick, precise. A single round silenced him before he could react. The team froze for a heartbeat, then resumed movement. Every step forward was a calculated risk. Brooks whispered, "You make this look easy, but it's insane." Sarah didn't respond. She focused on the objective. "Spectre is close. We keep moving." Suddenly, lights flashed. An alarm. Spectre had been alerted to their presence. "Contact." Vance shouted from above. Gunfire erupted. The team dove for cover as bullets ricocheted off crates and metal walls. Sarah's commands cut through the chaos. Suppressive fire. Flank left. Reed, disarm the central console. Each action synchronized perfectly. Sarah moved like a conductor of war, orchestrating her team through chaos. A shadow moved ahead. Spectre himself, holding a tablet, barking orders into a radio. He was armed, calculating, confident. Eyes on target, Sarah whispered. She signaled Brooks. Suppressive fire on my mark. We neutralize him, then clear the facility. Bullets tore through the air. Sarah advanced, moving from crate to crate, keeping low. Spectre fired back, but Sarah anticipated his trajectory, dodging, returning precise shots to pin him down. Brooks and Vance flanked from opposite sides, cutting off escape routes. Moreno disabled electronic locks, Reed secured intel, and Hawley covered the rear. Almost there, Sarah muttered. Spectre tried to flee toward a fortified stairwell. Sarah sprinted, firing as she ran. She slid around a corner, just in time to intercept him. He leveled a pistol. She reacted instantly, grabbing his wrist mid-shot, twisting and disarming him. He stumbled back, shock in his eyes. You underestimated me, Sarah said. And now it's over. With Spectre captured, Sarah signaled the team. Secure the intel. Pack the explosives for controlled demolition. We moved to extraction. They worked swiftly. Every second counted. Spectre cursed and threatened, but Sarah remained unflinching. You're done. The team has you. No one else will get hurt tonight. Brooks shook his head in disbelief. We just took down Spectre. No one thought we could do this. Sarah checked the final crate of explosives. We didn't just take him down. We did it together. That's what matters. The team exited the facility with the enemy neutralized, moving toward the extraction zone under cover of smoke grenades. The desert wind whipped against their faces as the Black Hawk descended. Sarah looked at each team member, proud but exhausted. Everyone accounted for? Brooks nodded. Moreno, Reed, Hawley, and Vance all signaled affirmative. Good. Then we're leaving, she said. As they climbed aboard, the facility behind them erupted in controlled demolitions. Fire and smoke illuminated the night sky. The enemy's power had been shattered, their plans thwarted. Back at Fork Ridge, the team debriefed. Colonel Davis stood, arms crossed, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. You led your team through hell and back, he said. You captured Spectre alive, destroyed critical enemy infrastructure, and protected every member of your squad. Exceptional work, Lieutenant Collins. Sarah remained humble. It was a team effort, sir. I'm nothing without them. Brooks stepped forward. No one doubts that, Lieutenant, but the way you led us. You earned our respect, our trust, our loyalty, completely. Sarah allowed herself a faint smile. That's the point. Leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about making sure everyone survives and succeeds together. Hawley, still nursing his shoulder, muttered, You're not just our leader anymore. You're the reason we're still alive. Sarah nodded, exhausted but resolute. She had gone from the soldier who was ignored on base to the commander who had led the mission of a lifetime, facing betrayal, ambushes, and almost impossible odds. That night, the team gathered quietly near the barracks. No medals, no ceremony. Just the silent acknowledgement of what they had survived together. Brooks raised a canteen in a quiet toast. To Lieutenant Collins, the woman who led us through hell and didn't blink once. Sarah smiled faintly, lifting her own canteen. To all of you. The team that made it possible. They drank, the desert wind carrying their quiet triumph. The base that once ignored her now knew the truth. She was a leader, fearless, brilliant, and unwavering. Spectre's capture would send shockwaves through enemy ranks. But more importantly, the team had learned the ultimate lesson. Courage, loyalty, and trust weren't given. They were earned. And Lieutenant Sarah Collins had earned theirs completely.